So, how did you first hear about the Eddy family? Were you told these stories when you were a child? I know you told me stories when I was little. How did you learn about your ancestry?
Well, I think on my mother's side, she wasn't very interested in what they called at that time the spooks or the weird happenings.
Yeah, I know a lot of people in our family are not the biggest fan of the Eddy
Not the biggest
family.
fan.
Yeah, so.
So, as I was riding along in the car with my brother, I have an older brother, Richard, by 3.5 years. My parents would sometimes talk about things that were happening in the family. But there was another big occurrence that happened before I was born, and that was my grandfather disappeared. No one knew where he went. And my mother and father used to talk about it in the car, and I would pick up little bits of the conversation and try to combine it together to get more of a picture of what was happening. And my mother would say things like, "Oh, they probably took him, those weird people up in Chittenden, and took him to Honto's cave. And I bet they killed him." And this, of course, interested me because the words Honto's cave seemed embedded in my mind, and I always said to myself, well, when I get older, I'm going to try to find this Honto's cave.
So you didn't know what Honto's Cave was. Can you just give like a brief description of what that is, Honto's Cave?
Yeah. Several years ago, you went along, and
I didn't go along.
oh, you didn't go along on that
didn't
one,
go
did you?
along.
No, you didn't go along. You were home covering your head with a blanket. No, I don't know. But Cindy went along, and I met a distant relative at the cemetery. There are 3 cemeteries in Chittenden which are involved with our family and burials and that sort of thing. And I met a distant relative at a get-together, and he said that he thought he knew where Honto's cave was. And so I agreed to meet him, or we agreed to meet him one morning, I think about 9 o'clock, and he was going to take us there. So we went up, and he thought he knew exactly where it was. But since those early days in Chittenden, the landscape has changed tremendously, and people from out of state have bought land and built new luxurious homes across the road and that sort of thing, and the property's private. So there was a no trespassing sign. We went by it, and we went up into the woods right across from the cemetery, and spent a long time up there looking and couldn't find anything that resembled a cave. So on our way back to the car, there happened to be a groundskeeper cutting someone's lawn, and we stopped and asked him if he knew anything about Honto's cave. And he said, of course, I go deer hunting up in the woods up there. I know exactly where it is. And he told us where to go. And we walked almost directly to it. And it's a surprising thing because it's not really a cave as we think of caves in the side of the mountain. It's 2 huge rocks which look totally out of place, like some aliens placed them there or something. And one leans against the other, and there's an opening in the bottom. Small little stream runs through. And it's really strange, bizarre, beautiful. And this is where, in the early days, after the goings-on in the circle room, sometimes they would go by torches at night and go up there. And there was an artist by the name of Alex Capes that went up with some of the people at that time, and he even made a sketch of some Indians up on top and the people sitting in front of the cave, and they were having a gathering there. But it was quite beautiful. I enjoyed it, and I actually, in my studio, I actually have a stick hanging on the wall that I got from underneath the cave that I brought home.
All right.
Little
Yeah.
memento.
So what did they do there exactly in Honto's Cave?
Well,
Supposedly.
Yeah, well, they did the same sort of thing that they did in the circle room. They would create images of the deceased. And
What do you mean by create images? Would they? What does that mean?
That means that, well, they used to have people come from all over the eastern part of the United States. It was quite a famous place, the Eddy Homestead. And in the circle room,
at the time it
it
was.
was, yes, it was big news.
And not just the United States, but
All
the
over.
world. The world.
Yeah.
People came from all over the
That's
world.
right. And I'm surprised that it's faded out a bit, that it's not as prominent today in the news, because it was a big event in Vermont.
Yeah.
It still is. And but in the circle room, which was a room that they built above the dining room at the house, where people would congregate and have dinner before the festivities or the gathering upstairs, they would then go upstairs, and some of the things that took place would be that people would pay lots of money to see this, and they would bring to life deceased relatives and people that they knew, so they actually almost could touch their hands or converse with them.
So that's what you mean by images of people. You mean
Images,
they
bringing
saw-
back images of the people.
they saw
yeah.
physically what they believed to
Right.
be their relatives.
And they were dressed in some of their original type clothing, and people would say, "Oh, that's Amanda because I recognize her dress."
And they would
She
speak
wear
in
that
like certain
anywhere."
dialects and stuff too.
Yes, sometimes, and sometimes there were sounds involved, or noises and rappings, but this is.
And
the
what you
sort of-
mean by rappings? It's not like today's hip hop music. It's rappings as in
Maybe that's where it's got
describe
its origin.
rappings.
Who knows?
Describe
Well,
rapping.
Yeah, describe rapping. Well, you see, when my great-grandmother, and namely her brothers William and Horatio, were children, and they were going to a local school, a one-room schoolhouse, the teacher had a lot of difficulties with them because they could make simple things like rulers and inkwells actually rise in the air. And the other children in the room are sometimes petrified because they would start screaming because when they were standing up, their chairs would actually levitate above the floor.
Yeah.
And so they brought with them to the circle room some of these powers that they presumed to have. And and this room, the circle room, was just an empty, bare room. And when it was investigated by people from New York, like Colonel Olcott and Madame Blavatsky, that came there, they could never find any rooms where people could change costumes. There were never any secret passages, and it was inspected by engineers. In fact, the Eddies were never disproven. There are people that said they disproved, but in
Well,
reality they never were.
You could argue against that.
Yeah, you could argue against that, but these are the sorts of things that they carried with them in their minds, and when they went up to Honto's cave, and they had the same types of gatherings up there.
So the rappings were like noises and
Yeah, the
things?
rappings were noises that were made, different kinds of noises.
I know,
Sometimes-
like the Fox sisters that were famous.
Right, the Fox
they
sisters.
they made like noises to communicate with the dead through like popping their joints and their toes.
Yeah.
Did they do stuff like that or?
I can't answer that question.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know. I know they made there were a lot of strange noises and sounds, and some of them were
Did
instruments.
they? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, instruments, which could be.
Did they moved instruments and stuff and
Right.
played them and they
played
did things
them
with like their hands.
with their hands, and well, you see, when my great grandmother and her two brothers, Horatio and William, were sold off to a local carnival that came to Rutland to go off and perform these acts in different parts of the country, and they also went to England and Europe.
Yeah.
They presumed to have these talents, but in order to survive, they had to learn to do tricks.
What do
So
you
I
mean by
think-
to survive? Do you mean to make money, or were they?
To
They were
survive,
physically. They were
because
physically harassed, also.
Physically harassed. They were shot at.
Yeah.
One was attacked with a knife.
Which one of the brothers was
I
that?
think one of the brothers was attacked with.
Was it William or
I'm not
Horatio?
sure. One of them was attacked and shot. And
Was Mary with them when they went off to Europe and stuff? Or my
Mary was
great-grandmother?
very much a part of it.
So she was with them when
great-grandmother.
they were out over in Europe
Yeah,
too.
she was with them, and the father got compensation
Zephaniah, the
yeah,
father.
Zephaniah.
is the father.
for sending his children off.
This is a copy of Yankee Magazine dated January 1987, who wrote about when ghosts came to Chittenden, Vermont. and they wrote these. This was taken from Alcott's book, People from the Other World, as are the engravings. This is the Eddy brothers, William and Horatio. The family actually thinks that it goes the other way around, that this is Horatio and this is William, but this is the farmhouse. This is the article. This is what the circle room looked like. This is a cross section that an illustrator came up with, Henry Alcott, and created these for Alcott for his book. These were pictures of the materialized entities.
So there's a lot of different kinds of spirits that they I don't want to say dressed up as, but
They were male,
that
female,
materialized.
large, small. They were babies. You can see that they were.
So I mean, even if you don't believe that they actually that these spirits were like real, manifestations, even if you believe that they, dressed up in costume, it's still very impressive.
This is an engraving of Alcott weighing Honto. Honto was a female Indian spirit. And
Yeah, they
he
dressed up. They
weighed
dressed up
her.
in different cultures. They spoke different languages, which was the Eddy brothers were very uneducated. So them speaking these languages was, very very strange.
Then Joseph Citro, using the information from the Alcott book, wrote articles. This was in Vermont Life magazine. This is not from Alcott. This is Citro obtained that photograph. There was quite a bit of, this is from the day, the Times. This was 1874 when the spirits are at home. A visit to the farmer boy mediums of Vermont. And there were a number of newspapers articles across the entire United States. This is this is from a St. Louis newspaper, the St. Louis Republican. I don't know what this article was from. This was from Atlanta, Georgia, the Daily Constitution. Was when one of the Eddys was caught, and that would be Mary Eddy.
So that'd be my great great grandmother.
Yes.
Caught in the act of.
She was caught, she was at that time married.
So she was
Mrs. Huntoon.
So they found her faking this the materializations.
She was
right?
caught personating a spirit, is what the article says.
Right. So she was caught dressed up as a spirit, supposed spirit.
I believe somebody in the audience grabbed her hand as she materialized.
And when the lights came on, they performed in a very dark room, so
Right.
it was,
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who is the creator of Sherlock Holmes,
Yep, I've
was
read some of his
also
books.
a very interested in spiritualism, and he
I did
read
not
the
know that.
Alcott book, and he wrote about it. He wrote a 2-volume history of spiritualism, and a large section of that book is devoted to the Eddy family.
Oh wow! So that's even more. They get even more famous. Okay.
Right. He never, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did not visit the farmhouse.
Interesting. I didn't know that, but it's very interesting.
But so a number of people had read Alcott's book or
Right.
his articles in the newspaper, since they were published in New York City newspaper.
Right.
I have pictures of I have a lovely picture of Mary Eddy.
So that is my great great grandmother. At what age would you say that is?
Oh, this was probably shortly before she died. She died in 1910. I don't remember offhand how old she was. This was Mary Eddy, and this is Shelley's grandfather,
Oh,
her
cool.
grandson.
Very cool.
And it's written on the photograph that she worked as an actress in vaudeville, playing in Boston, Massachusetts at that time.